welcome to another episode of Wayne's World of Science and Technology. If you like what I'm trying to do, please feel free to hit me up on Buy Me a Coffee. There's a link in the description. Unfortunately, the Russians haven't pulled out of Ukraine yet, so rather than covering the science and technology I wanted to cover, here's more war coverage. As if we needed that. Pardon me, but I feel sorry for both the people of Ukraine and the people of Russia, most of who did not ask for this stuff. Oh, it is going to be brutal. Anyways, um, most of you are at least somewhat aware. Unfortunately, the media coverage is varied between horrid and awful, which, quite frankly, isn't surprising. Most media people aren't analysts. Most media people aren't uh, former soldiers. They don't necessarily know all the details, and even if you do know some of the details, it's so easy to miss the others, which you'll hear about in a moment. Um, anyways, I'm going to try and fill in some gaps, some really important gaps. So this is a red hat special. And yeah, the hat actually is red. I know it looks orange in this light, but it really is red. Trust me on that. Okay, first, each analyst can only work with what information they have. I cut a video on Russian equipment losses a while back, and what I thought it would impact, how it would impact Russian combat power. I didn't have all the information. Didn't know it at the time. I thought I did, but I didn't. About a week or so after, when I figured things were going to go really bad for Russia, Perrin came out with a video explaining how I'd gotten it wrong. And he did a wonderful job explaining it. There's a link to his video in the description. And you'll notice some of the things that he picked up on. I didn't pick up on the LPR and DPR troops, didn't even think of them. Didn't think of the Wagner mercenaries, didn't think of the Kadyrovites. Yeah, I did a real bad job on that one. Anyways, I think I'm going to do a bit better job on this one. I hope. But take what I say or what any other analyst says with a grain of salt. We can only work with what we know, and that doesn't mean we're going to interpret it correctly. It's always possible that we'll take a look at something and we'll think it's pink when it's more of a shade of red. Okay, since 1900, there's been a huge cultural shift. Many things that were considered normal at one time, like beating your wife, are now considered criminal. I know this sounds like a total non sequitur, but there's a point to it. That's one small example. There are millions of tiny ways that various cultures have shifted over the last 122 years. And that's a problem because those shifts are antithetical to authoritarian regimes. Authoritarian regimes like China and Russia are terrified of these changes, and rightly so. These changes are destabilizing. Russia is very much an imperialist power, and always has been. Even in Soviet times, it was imperialist, it was expansionist. And so these types of thought patterns that we're starting to see change more and more of the world slowly. There seems to be, how should I put it, every 10 years there seems to be a tiny shift towards fairness or a tiny shift towards justice or the rule of law. You know, all minor stuff, but over a period of time it all adds up. You know, when I was a kid, women were not allowed to have bank accounts. I'm only 65, for God's sakes. It wasn't that long ago. My aunt bought a pharmacy. The bank freaked because her dad wasn't there to sign for her. He was dead. And she wasn't married, so her husband wasn't there to sign for her. And they couldn't figure out what to do. Now, that wouldn't happen now. Not in North America, not in Europe. In some other places it might. I don't claim to know the entire world perfectly. But, there has been a huge cultural shift from, in 1900, almost nowhere were women allowed to vote. Now, they're allowed to vote almost everywhere. Now, we see women like Ursula von der Leyen as the head of the EU. We've got Liz Truss, Prime Minister of the UK. There's a lot of women in very powerful roles who are doing a heck of a lot of stuff. 120 years ago, Well, no way. So, all of this is a huge pressure on authoritarian regimes because fairness, honesty, all this sort of thing doesn't really do well in authoritarian regimes. Authoritarian regimes are predicated on the boss ordering you what to do. Doesn't matter whether it's fair, you get ordered what to do. So, there's a lot of pressure on these countries, and these changes are destabilizing. This is one of the reasons why China is so intent on building their own internet separate from the rest of the world, and why they block Western books regularly. They block movies like The Eternals, well, for that matter, Saudi Arabia did, because there were sex scenes in it that they didn't approve of. And quite frankly, after having seen the movie, those sex scenes were. The one sex scene that was in the movie was so boring it was. Well, the two people, and I'm sorry, but they could have looked like they were going to sleep. And I'm really sorry to the two actors, but that was one scene that just didn't work. Um, the same sex kiss, hey, that was fine. There was nothing gross about it or anything, unless, of course, you're a authoritarian who cannot stand anybody being able to live the way they want instead of the way you want. So, all these countries like Russia, China, North Korea, Iran for that matter, think of the riots in Iran caused by the hijab, the issue with the young lady who the morality police said wasn't wearing her hijab correctly. She ends up dead. Yes. Um, this is very destabilizing to these people. They're very scared of it. And, basic. I coined a term for this a while back. I mean, this is not something new. It's something that anthropologists have known is going on for years. They've known about this, these sort of shifts since the 1800s. Or, sorry, yeah, 1800s. I always get myself reversed between 18th century and 1800s. 1800s, late 1800s, they knew that these cultural shifts occurred, and they were starting to plot them. We know a lot more about them now. I just came up with a name because it's rather easier just to say great remix rather than explain the whole thing every single time. Um, I'll be cutting some videos to cover what this is so I can explain it in simple terms to everybody so that it'll make sense. And I mean, you'll be able to look at it and, quite frankly, to a certain extent, use it to your own advantage. Anyways, another pressure on Russia right now is economic. Their economy is heavily reliant on fossil fuel sales. Every time the price of fossil fuels drops, Russia gets hurt. Um, the Russian economy has never been in good shape. And because it's in such bad shape, and the fact that the oil prices were low for a long time, the Russian military suffered from a lack of modern equipment. And when I say a lack of modern equipment, a lot of what they've been using in Ukraine, and both the Ukrainians and the Russians, is Soviet era equipment. In some cases, it's been upgraded. In some cases, it hasn't. We're seeing literally antique tanks coming out of storage, T-62s, and they should have no place on a modern battlefield. They aren't safe. So I intend to cover the numbers on that in detail a while later because I know everybody was scared witless by global firepower and their idiotic descriptors saying that Russia was the number two military power. Pardon me, but as you may have guessed, I do not trust global firepower. They don't publish their uh, algorithms. And without their algorithm, I've got no way of telling whether or not what they're doing is accurate. And what I was seeing on their chart did not match what I was seeing. So, yeah, so we've been seeing tons and tons of antique equipment. And then you add in 9/11. 9/11 was a huge hit to the authoritarian powers. Most people don't realize this, but 9/11 caused a bunch of massive changes. And yeah, I know you hear about the US ones. I'm going to ignore the United States changes because everybody's heard about them. Let's go and take a look. The West started rearming after 9/11, believe it or not. A lot of people don't realize this, but it did. I follow military matters, so I had a bit of an idea about it. After 9/11, Canada replaced most of our main battle tanks with new ones. We put the old ones in reserve, of course, just in case. They're still useful for training, if nothing else. And we're replacing all of our fighter aircraft and all of our surface, combat, and supply ships, and our offshore patrol ships. And I believe they're looking at replacing the minesweepers too. So basically, by say 2035, Canada's going to have an entirely new navy. And we aren't talking a normal navy, we are talking an insane navy. The Royal Canadian Navy is going to be getting a couple of, well, the offshore patrol craft that we're currently building are bigger than our current frigates. Our new frigate slash destroyers, which according to my read of the specifications are actually bloody cruisers, and get this, we're building 15 of the damn things. Who else builds 15 ships in a single class? Not many countries. Canada's one of the few countries rich enough to do it. Point is that these ships are going to be bloody dangerous, to put it lightly. I've compared the specs to the British and Australian specs based on the same general hull, and it's just not the same. Just not the same at all. But that's another point. Anyways, so Canada's doing that. Australia is replacing most of its surface fleet. Yeah, Australia, all the way down in the South Pacific. They're also replacing their old subs with nukes. They're replacing their warplanes too. Britain has 2 new aircraft carriers, new frigates which are being laid down and getting ready for launch now. The Type 45 destroyers are actually still pretty new. And they've got some new stuff coming along as well, including a new main battle tank and new fighters. France is building some absolutely amazing fighters and has been replacing parts of its fleet along with continuing development of their own indigenous main battle tank, the Leclerc, which is a really interesting design if you're into these technical things. At some point, I'm going to sit down and go over a whole bunch of main battle tanks. That'll be fun. So China, and more especially Russia, just can't compete against the West. They don't have the technology, the resources, the infrastructure. Note that I'm only covered 3 countries there. I covered those 3 countries because those are the 3 that I know the best militarily. Didn't cover the work that Finland's doing. I didn't cover the work that Sweden's doing. You hear about those new Swedish submarines? No, did you? And nobody's going to hear them underwater either. Then there's all the work that is being done in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is launching new ships. Spain is launching new ships. Italy's launching new ships. They're all buying new fighters. Slovakia donated all their fighters. I think it was Slovakia, all their fighters to Ukraine, and is getting new fighters. We are talking there was a major rearmament going on before. The Ukraine war has just put it into top gear. And Russia's production capability can't keep up. Nor can China's. Seriously, China cannot keep up. They do not have enough dry docks to build ships. They do not have enough plants to build fighters. They just cannot keep up with everybody else. And part of the reason for that is that if Canada needs a gun, we go to Leonardo in Italy and buy theirs. China can't do that, nor can Russia. They have to build their own gun. We need missiles. Hey, let's go and grab some standard missiles off the United States. Oh yeah, we want the best Aegis fire control system and radar system on the planet. And we bought it from the U.S. That's one of the reasons why our ships look like just a little top-heavy. They aren't, but they look that way because there's this massive dome up there protecting the radar gear. So, this is why you're seeing all this saber rattling. If they can get something, and when I say they, I mean China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, all the rest of them, if they can get something for making loud noises, they will grab it. because they know they don't have a chance otherwise, or at least they should know. Obviously, Putin miscalculated. I think he must have been reading Global Firepower, maybe. I rather suspect right now that China realizes that they've miscalculated. They were probably reading Global Firepower too. And everybody's probably getting a little bit scared. So that's why Putin and Russian state TV keep on bringing up the idea of using nuclear weapons. Loud noises are safer than doing something if you can scare your opponent. And that's also why they had to go back and start screaming they didn't mean against Ukraine. Oops, Putin messed up. Yeah, well, you know what, Vlad? I just don't think that Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Poland, the Czech Republic, the Slovak Republic, Slovakia, or any of these countries, Italy, Greece, are going to be exactly happy to let you toss a nuke around. You toss a nuke around, you are going to get steamrolled so damn hard you won't know what hit you. And you know what? China will join in. They'll be just as happy to stomp on you as everybody else. So, as I said, if they can't scare us, they have to give up, because neither Russia nor China has the ability to win a conventional war against enemies with equal or superior equipment. And North Korea, Iran, and the other problem states are too small to field militaries that are significant, really. So, Russia tried for an advantage now. Russia probably knew that by 2030 militarily that they didn't have a chance. So they decided to move while they could. And they also probably thought that, well, I'm almost 100% certain that they thought that the Ukrainians wouldn't fight. Exactly how they figured that out, I don't know. Anybody who knows Ukrainians would know that they tend to get really upset if you poke them with a stick. And they were perfectly willing to sit there nice and quiet and be peaceful as long as Russia wasn't doing anything. But, well, 2014 happened and Russia poked them with a stick. Ukraine woke up and got mad, which is why all of a sudden they started running thousands and thousands of troops through training with the United States, Canada, the UK, Poland, and a whole pile of other countries. And that's what made the difference. Training. You know, Russia is apparently going to give their new conscripts 2 weeks training. The United States gives nearly 6 months basic training. I'm not sure what Canada gives. I know it's pretty long as well. In effect, the average Canadian, well, the average NATO infantryman is as well trained as the average Russian VDV paratrooper. The only thing that the average infantryman isn't trained on that the VDV is drops. Think about that. That's how much more training our troops get. Just think to yourself, how much better you got at something over time. Yeah. So, it doesn't make any of them less dangerous. I mean, a quartered animal can be dangerous indeed, but we know that. We're taking precautions. I really can't see any way that tossing a nuke anywhere is going to win Vladimir anything besides a quick death. I have a suspicion if he tries it, it's quite possible he may face an internal rebellion. I don't know about that. I know there's a lot of people have to be really upset right now. I read the pro-Russian Telegram channels, and there are people who are just furious, and have been for months. But it's been getting worse because, well, the government and the military have been totally screwing up as far as they're concerned. And I mean, like, when you've got the people, the military people, the mill bloggers all screaming for your head, you're in trouble. And that's practically where Vladimir Putin is right now. So no, I don't take Putin's threat seriously. The Russian government should be well aware by now that threats aren't going to improve their situation. In fact, they'll make them worse. Anyways, folks, that's it for tonight. I wish you all a good time, and here's hoping that Vlad isn't that dumb, though, unfortunately, based on his moves to date, he could quite well be. Good night.